It was just another quiet morning in Elk Ridge, Kentucky. The kind of morning where the mist still clung to the tops of the hills like stretched-out cotton, and the air smelled faintly of honeysuckle and diesel. The town was slowly waking up, porch lights flicking off, trucks starting in gravel driveways, coffee brewing in old aluminum pots. Nestled deep in the folds of Appalachia, Elk Ridge had always been the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, and everybody's business. Which is exactly why the silence around Emily Vance's disappearance was so loud. On the evening of May 18th, 1995, Emily finished her usual Thursday shift at Harlan's Grocery, her name still stitched into the maroon vest she wore behind the register. It was the start of a warm spring weekend, and school had let out early for senior week. Emily was 17, bright, sweet, and stubborn in that quiet kind of way. She had long strawberry blonde hair that always looked sunlit, even under fluorescent lights, and a nervous little laugh that made people want to reassure her, even when nothing was wrong. She clocked out at exactly 8:04 p.m. Surveillance footage from the store's grainy overhead camera showed her waving to co-worker Becky Talbert, tossing her apron into the laundry bin, and walking out the automatic doors with a half-empty bottle of Mountain Dew. That was the last confirmed sighting of Emily Vance. The walk from Harlan's Grocery to her home on Maple Hollow Road was short, less than a half mile. She did it almost every evening, cutting behind the feed mill, following a narrow dirt path that ran parallel to the old train tracks before it looped back toward the main road. That night, she never made it home. By 9:30 p.m., her mother, Carol Vance, was pacing the porch. By 10:15, she was on the phone with the police. Officers combed the area that night with flashlights and dogs, but there were no signs of a struggle. No torn clothing, no dropped belongings. It was as if she'd been swallowed whole by the woods, or worse, as if she'd never existed at all. 2 days later, Emily's purse was found in a drainage ditch near the tracks, not far from a decommissioned switchyard. The contents were undisturbed: wallet, bus pass, chapstick, even the little spiral notebook where she doodled in the margins during slow shifts. Her cash was still there. No blood, no signs of a fight, just her things, quietly waiting to be noticed. And yet, nothing else turned up. Detectives looked into everyone. Her ex-boyfriend, the 1-year-old town mechanic with a short fuse, the delivery driver who always lingered too long at the store, even a traveling preacher who'd passed through town that weekend. But every lead eventually hit the same dead end. No motive, no evidence, no witnesses, just a girl who walked into the dusk and didn't walk back out. Whispers began to fill the space where facts should have been. Some said she ran away, left town for a boy in Tennessee or maybe Cincinnati. Others swore they'd seen headlights parked down by the quarry that night. There were rumors about a drifter, someone who'd hopped a freight car, someone who didn't belong. But nothing stuck. Weeks passed, then months. The flyers weathered in the rain. The posters curled at the edges. Her photo, a blurry yearbook shot of Emily with half a smile, started to feel less like a person and more like a symbol. A cautionary tale. Carol Vance never stopped searching. She left porch lights on. She wrote letters to senators. She visited psychics. Every so often, she'd get a call from someone claiming to have seen Emily, a girl fitting her description, working at a diner in Ohio, hitchhiking along I-64, standing alone at a Greyhound station in Lexington. Every time, the hope flared, then burned out. By 1997, the case file was shelved. By 2000, the state police had transferred the original detective. And by 2010, the whole town had quietly accepted what nobody wanted to say out loud. Emily Vance was gone, and she wasn't coming back. But then, 27 years later, something resurfaced. In the fall of 2022, a retired rail worker named Lowell Kinney was cleaning out his attic in nearby Pine Knot. He was moving into assisted living and sorting through a lifetime of boxes, old tools, train logs, photos. At the bottom of one crate was a shoebox, warped by humidity. Inside were a handful of Polaroids, mostly blurry shots of boxcars, rusty engine parts, and an old maintenance shed from the Elk Ridge switchyard, taken sometime in the mid-90 seconds. But one photo stopped him cold. It showed a girl standing just outside a weathered red boxcar, partially obscured by shadows. Her posture was tense, her shoulders hunched. She wasn't smiling. Her left hand gripped the edge of the boxcar door, and her eyes, though out of focus, seemed locked on the camera. Behind her, deep in the darkened car, there was just enough visible to make out the shape of a blanket and what looked like duct tape. Lowell didn't know the girl, but her face, it stirred something. He called his daughter, who called the sheriff's office. The photo was taken to the state lab in Frankfurt. Forensic analysts scanned and analyzed the chemical makeup of the image and confirmed that it had been taken in May of 1995. Within the same week, Emily vanished. Though the resolution was poor, facial markers were consistent with Emily's DMV photo. Enough for the state to reopen the file. The photo went public within weeks. Carol Vance, now in her 60s and living alone, confirmed with trembling hands. That was Emily's jacket, the one she'd sewn the patch onto herself, the one she wore the night she disappeared. But even more chilling was where the photo had been taken. The boxcar behind Emily wasn't just any car. It belonged to a man who'd worked the lines in and around Elk Ridge for over a decade. A man who'd lived in an old mobile home just 2 miles from where her purse had been found. A man nobody had thought to question back then because, well, he'd been part of the system. A known face. A trusted one. His name was Delbert Cade. And what investigators would soon uncover about Delbert and what he was doing the week Emily vanished would unravel nearly 3 decades of silence. Delbert Cade wasn't what most people would call memorable. Back in the 90s, he worked maintenance for the Elk Ridge rail line clearing brush, inspecting track switches, checking boxcars for wear and tear. He lived alone in a faded single-wide trailer up on Balsam Hill, just a few turns off the same back road Emily used to walk home. He didn't have a criminal record, didn't drink, didn't hang around town much. Folks described him as quiet but polite, kept to himself, the kind of man you'd nod to at the gas station, but couldn't remember if he nodded back. That, detectives would later say, was the danger. When the photo surfaced in 2022, Delbert was already in a nursing home in Danville, suffering from early-stage dementia. The name scratched on the back of the Polaroid, ELKR box 4375/95, matched an inventory tag assigned to a derelict boxcar. Delbert had reportedly sealed and logged for disposal in May of 1995, but the car was never scrapped. Instead, it was quietly relocated to a private rail yard 12 miles outside of town. State investigators requested access. The property had changed hands multiple times over the years, but the boxcar was still there. Weathered red paint, peeling, the doors rusted shut. It hadn't been opened in over 2 decades. When forensic teams forced the doors open, what they found inside left them reeling. The interior had clearly once been lived in makeshift bedding fashioned from wool blankets, a Coleman lantern, 2 half-burned candles. But tucked behind a wall panel was the real discovery, a bundle of cloth that had rotted down to scraps. Among the debris, they recovered a rusted metal bracelet. On the inside of the charm were the faint letters, E.V. Emily Vance. The boxcar was immediately treated as a crime scene. Ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs were brought in. Soil samples tested, fluids swabbed, and though time had eaten most of the evidence, the autopsy team later confirmed there were traces of blood beneath the floorboards, human, and a partial DNA match to Carol Vance. At that point, what had been a haunting mystery turned into a full-scale homicide investigation. Detectives interviewed everyone who'd known Delbert Cade, co-workers, supervisors, neighbors. Most described him as dull, unremarkable. But a few offered odd memories, stories they hadn't thought much of until now. One man, a former conductor named Ray Pritchard, recalled seeing Delbert welding shut the boxcar in question after it had supposedly been decommissioned. Another claimed Delbert was obsessive about keeping the keys to the old yard's gate, even after it had closed. A third said Delbert kept a padlocked chest in his trailer, though no one ever saw inside it. Detectives got a warrant. Inside the chest, buried under rusted bolts and old train schedules, were a handful of disturbing keepsakes: an old grocery apron with a faded name tag, a spiral notebook with doodles in the margins, a yellowed clipping from The Elk Ridge Herald, the headline read, "Teen Vanishes Walking Home." In the back of the notebook, scrawled in shaky handwriting, were 4 words, "I didn't mean to." But what haunted investigators most was that the notebook stopped mid-sentence. Delbert Cade was charged with the kidnapping and murder of Emily Vance. But by the time it went to trial, he could barely hold a conversation. The dementia had progressed fast. Some days, he didn't know his own name. Other days, he mumbled incoherent phrases, something about the girl in the dark, the whistle of the train, and the light that wouldn't go. 2 out. He never confessed, never denied it either. In lieu of a trial, the judge ordered a mental competency hearing. Delbert was ruled unfit to stand. The case stalled in legal limbo. But even without a conviction, the evidence had reopened old wounds. And with it, something new emerged. Something no one expected. A second photo. It was mailed anonymously to the Kentucky State Police. No return address. Just a single Polaroid inside a plain envelope, postmarked from Johnson City, Tennessee. This time, the image showed the outside of the boxcar, but in the foreground, almost blurred by motion, was the back of someone's head. A girl with strawberry blonde hair. Analysts compared the angle and timestamp to the first photo. Both had been taken within minutes of each other. But that wasn't the terrifying part. The terrifying part was the corner of a second face just barely visible behind the edge of the door. It didn't match Delbert Cade. The jawline was younger, clean-shaven, teeth clenched in what looked like a grimace. But no identifying details could be pulled. The resolution was too poor. The question was immediate and chilling. Was Delbert working alone? Or was someone else involved and still out there? State investigators re-examined the case from top to bottom. Old leads were pulled. Witnesses re-interviewed. They looked at every freight worker who had passed through Elk Ridge in the spring of '95. A few names stood out, including one that had previously slipped through the cracks. Glenn Roper, a seasonal brake operator with a history of indecent exposure charges, who'd skipped town a week after Emily vanished. But Glenn had died in a car crash in 2003. No way to interrogate. No way to compare DNA. Another possible thread, gone. Still, the presence of a second figure in the photo reignited public interest. The Vance family pushed for a full forensic reconstruction. Crowdsourced funding poured in. A new cold case task force was formed, with one goal: to find out what really happened that night, because even if Delbert Cade had been the one to lock that door, someone else might have helped him close it. While the town grappled with the disturbing implications of a possible second suspect, the investigation pushed forward quietly, meticulously. The forensic team managed to extract partial prints from inside the boxcar, smudged and faint but still usable. One print lifted from the inside of the lantern handle matched Delbert Cade. Another, smaller and positioned near the underside of the boxcar's wooden floorboards, came back as unidentified. It didn't match Emily. It didn't match Delbert. And it didn't match anyone in CODIS, the national database. It was a ghost print. Meanwhile, Carol Vance, who had spent decades trapped between grief and uncertainty, found herself back in the spotlight. News vans returned to Elk Ridge. Journalists stood outside her porch asking questions no mother should have to answer. She didn't speak to most of them, but in one rare interview, her voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I used to dream she was still alive. I'd see her standing on the porch, like she'd just walked home. But now I think she never left that boxcar." It broke the hearts of everyone watching. But not all leads were emotional. Some were practical. For one, investigators discovered that Delbert Cade had rented a storage unit on the outskirts of Knox County under a second name, L. G. Chandler. The lease had been paid in cash for years, and oddly, it had never defaulted, not even after Delbert was moved into the nursing home. Someone had been covering the payments. The lock was cut. Inside the unit were dozens of old tools, dusty furniture, and 2 filing cabinets filled with train schedules and logbooks from the 1,980 seconds and 90 seconds. At first glance, it looked like hoarding. But tucked in the back, investigators found a locked drawer with something else entirely. Inside was a cassette tape, no label. Just the faint smell of mildew and iron. They played it. Static. Then a soft metallic clunk. Then breathing. For 34 seconds, all you could hear was heavy, panicked breathing, like someone trying not to cry. Then a muffled voice, female, young, pleading, "Please, I won't tell. Just let me out. Please." Click. The tape cut off there. No date, no context. But for the task force, that was enough. They brought in audio engineers who digitally enhanced the tape. The voice was compared to old recordings of Emily voicemails, family videos. There was a 91% vocal match. It wasn't definitive, but it was deeply, deeply disturbing. Forensic linguists noted a second, much fainter sound layered beneath her voice, a squeaking hinge, and what may have been train horns in the distance. It placed the tape, once again, near the rail yard. But who recorded it? That's when a name surfaced again. Lawrence "Buck" Rydell. Buck was a part-time yard hand in '95, working odd shifts with Cade. He was never officially listed on the original suspect list. He left Elk Ridge just weeks after Emily's disappearance and had moved several times since. But now, he was living just one county over in London, Kentucky. Still quiet, still unknown, still working nights. When police showed up at his door with a warrant, he barely reacted. They found nothing directly tying him to Emily's disappearance. No Polaroids, no clothing, no DNA. But in his shed, they found something strange. Pinned to the back wall were dozens of newspaper clippings, all about missing women. Not just Emily, others. Some from nearby counties, some from out of state. There were red markings on a few underlined names, circled phrases like, "last seen walking alone," and "no known witnesses." But still, nothing illegal. Until they checked his truck. Inside the glove box, tucked beneath a road atlas, was a faded photograph. Another Polaroid. A shot of the same, a Boxcar ELKR box 437, but this time taken from the inside. In the frame was a hand, pale, gripping the edge of a wool blanket. Behind it, barely visible, was a face turned away from the camera, hair covering most of the features, but in the bottom corner, just faintly etched in pen, were the letters EV. It was enough for an arrest. Rydell was charged with obstruction of justice and accessory to murder. In questioning, he refused to speak. But the prosecution argued that he had known all along what happened to Emily Vance and helped Cade cover it up. As for motive, that part remained murky. There were no signs of sexual assault, no ransom, no prior connection to Emily. It seemed senseless, random, but prosecutors believed the evidence pointed to a ritual, some sick obsession with control and silence. 2 men, 1 ringleader, 1 follower. A forgotten boxcar. A girl who simply walked the wrong path home. But without a full confession, no one could say for sure. In court, Rydell sat stone-faced while Carol Vance took the stand. Her voice cracked as she held up the rusted bracelet found in the boxcar. The charm was barely visible, but it still carried weight. "This was hers," she said. "You don't know what it's like, waiting to bury your child for 27 years. The courtroom was silent, but still, the trial never reached a climax. Just weeks before a verdict could be reached, Delbert Cade died in his nursing home bed, never having answered for what he'd done. And Rydell? The charges fell apart due to lack of direct physical evidence. He walked. Emily's murder remains officially unsolved. The people of Elk Ridge didn't know what to make of it. The town had spent nearly 3 decades haunted by what happened to Emily Vance. Now, with suspects named, damning evidence uncovered, and even her voice heard on tape, justice still slipped through their fingers. There was no conviction, no body, no clear confession. Just fragments. And fragments don't bury a daughter. After the trial fell apart, Carol Vance released a short statement to the press. She stood on her front porch in a cardigan too thin for December, looking like a woman suspended in time. Her words were quiet but not weak. This town let her vanish, and now they want to move on. But I won't. Emily didn't walk into that boxcar on her own. Someone opened the door, and someone else watched them close it. She turned and went inside. She didn't answer questions. She never gave another interview again. Still, the public pressure didn't fade. If anything, it grew louder. The podcast world had discovered the case, The Boxcar Girl, they called her. A new true crime series began airing episodes weekly. Reddit threads speculated about secret accomplices, hidden cameras, even railroad conspiracy theories. A documentary team from Louisville contacted the family. A TikTok account with over 3 million followers started recreating her final walk home in slow, eerie detail. People cared now, just not when it mattered most. And then came one final twist. In early 2023, a local reporter named Jace Mullins, who'd been covering the case from day one, got a call from a former Elk Ridge deputy who wished to remain anonymous. The man was dying of pancreatic cancer and had nothing to lose. What he told Jace would change everything. According to the deputy, and back in 1995, just 2 days after Emily went missing, Delbert Cade had shown up at the Elk Ridge precinct with what he claimed was an equipment concern. He wanted to report a damaged rail switch near the old yard, claimed it was unsafe. A deputy was dispatched to check it out, but when he arrived, there was nothing wrong. No damaged switch, no equipment. But here's what matters. The deputy noted the stop in the daily log, and on that log sheet, tucked in the margin next to Cade's name, was a note. Just 3 words. Smelled like bleach. That report was never followed up, never filed into the official record. The sheet disappeared sometime in 1996. But Jace had a lead now. He dug through old call logs, utility reports, even railroad inspection records. And in a dusty county archive he found something everyone else had missed. A bill of lading, an inventory slip showing that Boxcar ELKR Box 437 had been marked for inspection on the very night Emily disappeared. The timestamp? 8:26 p.m. Less than 30 minutes after she left the store. The inspector listed for that shift was Delbert Cade. That was the final connection. It placed him not just near the scene, but with the boxcar, the same one she was later photographed beside at the exact window of time she vanished. But the prosecution had closed its file. No double jeopardy. No retrial for Cade. And Rydell? He was gone. Moved out of state. Disconnected his phone. A ghost. So Jace published everything. He wrote a 7-part series for the Appalachian Standard, detailing the holes in the original case, the discarded evidence, the missed opportunities. It went viral. Donations flooded in. A new bill passed in Kentucky, requiring mandatory re-review of all unsolved cases where physical evidence had resurfaced posthumously. It was too late for Emily, but maybe not for the next girl. In the summer of 2024, on the 29th anniversary of her disappearance, a small crowd gathered near the old rail line just outside of Elk Ridge. They held candles. They tied yellow ribbons to the trees. Carol Vance was there, older, thinner, but standing tall. And then, for the first time in nearly 3 decades, she did something no one expected. She walked down the dirt path, the same one Emily took that night. She walked it in silence, past the overgrown feed mill, past the now locked rail yard gate, past the curve where they found the purse, step by step, and at the end of the path, she laid a single item on the ground. Emily's spiral notebook, the one from her purse. The final page was blank, but the gesture said everything. She was done waiting. The case of Emily Vance will never have a clean ending. There won't be a courtroom sketch of justice served. No perp walk. No last-minute confession that ties it all together. What remains instead is something quieter, heavier. A legacy of silence broken only by the people who refused to forget her. In late 2024, the Kentucky Cold Case Initiative formally added Emily's file to its special status list, a designation reserved for cases that are unofficially solved, but legally unresolved. Her name joined a short list of victims whose stories were believed, even if their killers never saw prison walls. The old boxcar was finally destroyed, melted down under state order, but not before a preservation team took one last scan of the interior using high-res LiDAR. Hidden in the grain of the floorboards, they discovered a faint carving in the wood etched with something sharp. A knife? A key? It was hard to read, but the text enhanced it digitally. 4 words, "I'm still here, Emily." Whether she wrote it or not, no one can say. But to her mother, it was proof. Emily had fought. She hadn't gone quietly. She had left something behind. In the wake of all this, Elk Ridge has changed. The rail yard was bought by a developer and turned into a memorial park. Where rusted boxcars once stood, there's now a small walking path lined with benches and white pines. At the center stands a bronze plaque with a portrait of Emily smiling, hair pulled back, a glint of teenage defiance in her eyes. The inscription reads, "In memory of those who vanished too soon, and the families who never stop looking." The town's high school started an annual scholarship in her name. It goes to a graduating senior planning to study criminal justice or forensic science. Every spring, students write essays about truth, about justice, about the questions that don't always have answers. And every spring, Carol Vance sits on the panel and reads every single one. She never remarried, never moved away. But in her own way, she found a kind of peace, not closure. Maybe, but clarity. She once told a local reporter, "There's this myth that you get over it. You don't. You build your life around the missing part, like a house around a hole in the floor. You learn not to fall in." There were still calls sometimes, a tip from someone claiming to know where Emily's body was buried, a sighting in some small-town diner, a message from a psychic. But those calls came less and less. The world moved on, and so did Carol. And yet, some mysteries still linger. In December 2024, a new DNA analysis technique, one that uses ultra-degraded samples, was tested on the blood found beneath the Boxcar's floor. This time, the sample returned a near-complete profile. And it didn't just match Emily, it matched another missing person from 1994, a girl from West Virginia. Different name, different case, same type of disappearance. Authorities now believe the Boxcar may have been used more than once. Delbert Cade had worked across 4 counties during his railroad career. At least 3 unsolved disappearances from the early 92nds shared overlapping geography. Similar patterns, similar details. All girls, all alone. It's possible Emily wasn't the only one. And maybe that's the hardest part. The idea that behind the headlines, the press conferences, the candlelight vigils, there might be others, girls whose names never made it to the plaques or podcasts, whose stories were buried in different towns, in different train yards, behind locked doors no one thought to open. For Carol Vance, the truth will always matter, even if it comes in pieces, even if it never adds up to justice. Because someone has to keep asking. Someone has to keep walking that path home. And for the rest of us, those who listen, who watch, who try to understand, it's a reminder that sometimes evil doesn't wear a mask. It wears a name tag. It walks with keys. It knows the schedules. And sometimes, the most terrifying monsters are the ones we don't notice. Like this video if Emily's story moved you. Her case may be closed on paper, but her voice still echoes and your support helps keep it alive. Comment below. Do you believe Delbert Cade acted alone? Or do you think there's still someone out there who knows more than they've said? And if you've ever known someone who vanished, tell us their name. Tell us their story. You never know who's watching. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life mysteries, cold cases, and hidden truths. Because the more we remember, the less power silence holds. This case is based on authentic investigative techniques and real cold case protocols. While names and locations have been altered for privacy, the events reflect true patterns from unresolved cases across the United States.